Good morning. Just a little bit of a brief behind this event. The idea for this webinar came long ago from our PTG, our Parent Teachers Group, who had run something similar before the pandemic. And actually, we would all have preferred to run it in person, but we were just facing such a full school calendar in May and June that it was actually difficult to get a venue to do it. This webinar will last for about an hour, and we hope you can stay with us throughout the session. Let me just share with you the agenda. So there we go. You can see the agenda. We will begin with Coke Smith, who will present for 10 minutes. And then we will have a question and answer for 10 minutes, after which we will move to our next speaker, followed by Q&A. If you have any questions, please add them to the chat, and we will pose the questions to the speakers during the Q&A. So for our first speaker, I would like to welcome Coke Smith. Let me just highlight you, Coke. Right, so everyone can see you. There we go. That's Coke Smith, who is our curriculum leader for environmental science in our secondary school. Coke is an avid wildlife photographer and is acutely aware of the environment as he spends a lot of his time outdoors. Coke will cover some basics on air quality and talk about our situation in Bangkok. Welcome, Coke.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to try to share a slideshow. Let me just see if I can make this work. I'm now highlighting my screen. Are you guys seeing that okay?
Yep, we can see your screen.
Okay, so I'm just going to reduce this down to the side, and I'm going to go ahead and start my slideshow with you. And it's geared to be just basically informative on some of the key terms, some of the key concepts of air quality, with Bangkok being the case study primarily. Okay, so most of the pictures you see here will be kind of just representations of a key point that I want to make. This picture, though, I took from the Bayok on a particularly clear day. My son and I would often go up to the very tops of the buildings, and I love these very clear days that we have here in Bangkok. And it's a really beautiful city when you see it, when it's crystal clear like this. Unfortunately, though, we're just finishing a pretty epic poor air quality season here in Bangkok, where this kind of view would not have been possible for almost 4 months now. And so the question I have is, that I think we all have, is what's going on? Oh, what's happening? And this is not today, although today I think is relatively unhealthy. These kinds of incredibly congested, foggy, almost foggy days, smog is the correct term, but some people confuse it as fog, have been pervasive for the last several months, basically from around January or February all the way through now to May. And so I'd like to kind of share with you what we know, what we in the sciences know as to be some of the root causes for what's going on, again, with Bangkok being the main issue. So a key term that we all know, we've heard it a million times, is what we call the air quality index, the so-called AQI. And I think most of us have probably seen this map or some version of this map at one point or another over the last few months here. And this is an actual AQI map that highlights several air quality stations throughout the kingdom, as well as some in other countries here. I think Thailand should be very proud that if you could just take a look, it's not like we're filtering out Burma or we're filtering out Vietnam or Cambodia stations. Thailand just has an amazing number of actual air quality stations where they're measuring various attributes of the air. And so on any given day, you can log on, and I put some links at the back of this slideshow. This slideshow will be available to anyone who wants it. That it gives you an idea of what the AQI is in any particular area in Thailand on any particular day, and it's updating constantly. It's a 24/7 updating sort of scenario here. But this was a particularly bad day. Okay, when I snapshotted this, and it was you can see that there were areas up in the far north that were as high as 500, and that's just astronomically high. I lived in China for a number of years, and we actually moved to Thailand with the consideration for me and my family of better air quality. Unfortunately, Thailand has actually surpassed China with respect to poor air quality, and these days are kind of an idea of what areas of the Thailand are facing. And Bangkok is our area of concern here on that particular day. This was in March, if I'm not mistaken. It was pretty bad here too. It was pretty bad here too. So the air quality index, and what I'd like to do is show you a little bit about what it is. So if you were to pick and actually choose any of those sites on that map, if I were to go back here, just randomly choose the 271, for example, I should be able to pull up a more informative set of data that each station is supposed to present. And when we think about the AQI, we're thinking about a lot of different factors here, ranging from PM 2.5, which I'll talk about in a moment. And I know the doctor will have a slide on that as well. PM 10, ozone, nitrogen oxide, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, temperature, pressure, humidity, and wind. So all the stations collect this data. One of the things I've noticed in the last couple of weeks, though, is many of the stations are no longer actually publicly showing these data, which is, I think, troubling. I'm not sure exactly why that is. I hope that's a temporary situation, but I'm seeing mostly just PM 2.5 and PM 10 as far as publicly available data on the websites these days, but I'm hoping that we can correct that. I know they're collecting data here too. Now, when you look at the actual AQI, the air quality index, it considers all of these. Okay, so all of these compounds and abiotic conditions are actually something that are considered by meteorological societies, air quality control offices, and so on and so forth. And they are actually very, very important. We tend to really focus on PM 2.5, which I'll talk about in a minute. But also, many reporting AQI reports also consider what are called volatile organic compounds, the so-called VOCs. Now, these are vapors, these are fumes, these are things that you wouldn't necessarily see on this particular readout for air quality station. This was I just did a quick little screenshot of some examples of VOCs that are considered as well. And some cities have more of these than others. Bangkok has quite a few of these. In fact, this list here was the top set of VOCs that Bangkok has. This was actually from a Bangkok list here. So it's not like it's a random list out of LA or anything like that. It's actually quite local. But this was, like I said, a small screenshot of literally hundreds of VOCs that are emitted on a daily, hourly basis here in Bangkok. Okay. Now, when you're reading these graphs, it's important to see the color coding is just like the so-called color codes that we all see on a daily basis. And I'll also show in the next slide here. Green means it's acceptable. Green means everything is okay. Red means it's hazardous. It's unhealthy. And there's a scale of this that you'll see in just a moment. I'm sure you've seen it before. And PM10, for example, it's kind of heading towards that unhealthy range. But anything in the greens and the blues are considered to be okay. So you can kind of get an idea. Thailand, Bangkok in general, tends to be somewhat reasonably okay in the ozone, nitrogen oxide, sulfur dioxide categories. Interestingly so. There are bad days, but in general, these are actually in the green on any given day. Even on an unhealthy day, this unhealthy day is unhealthy primarily because of the particulate matter. Okay, so we'll talk more about that right about now. But first, I want to share with you what is exactly involved with respect to an actual calculation of the so-called AQI. As you can see, there's hourly data that is put forth, that is collected by the sensors at all these stations. The nearest one to us is our school. We actually have one here at Bangkok Patana School. But the official governmental site, the nearest one is the naval station that's right down on Sukhumvit, just a little bit from here. But they'll collect all these data here, from sulfur dioxide to the nitrogen oxides, ammonia too. Okay, we got the NH3s, we got CO and ozone on an hourly basis. And then they convert these into sub-indexes, but those are basically conversion factors that put relative importance on one over the other. And from what I understand, stations will have different ways of converting their sub-index, but they convert all of this into the so-called published AQI. Okay, and some stations collect all of these. Some stations collect one or two. Some stations only collect PM 2.5. So the net result is the AQI that we read, that is published by governmental sources and so on. So that's just kind of in a nutshell how the AQI is collected. If anyone really wants to know the real down and dirty of how that's calculated, I have a source for this, and it's actually really, really complicated. Computers do it. But what is 2.5? What is this magic number of PM 2.5? When I first started teaching about air quality, we used the term particulate matter, and that was it. We didn't really have much more than that. And then this amazing concept of PM10 came out, and for years and years and years, we would, even in the high-tech scenario, we talk about PM10, particulate matter 10, and those would be microns. Those are a unit of measurement here. So you can see this is a human hair, a cartoonish version of a human hair, okay, that we can all kind of relate to it with respect to size. And you can see a PM10 molecule or particulate would be approximately this size in relationship to a human hair. So you can imagine about 5 particles of PM10 size could stretch across the width of a human hair. That gives you an idea. And these are particles that are actually in the atmosphere. They're floating around, but multiple causes for these, and they are a matter of concern. But they're actually fairly large. Okay, they are actually on the large end of particulate matter. So much so that the actual health effects will depend on the person and their condition and so forth, but are not as bad as the so-called newer version. Now, I say newer, it's newer for people like me who've been paying in the industry for decades. But as far as the population in general is concerned, it's probably the one most people are familiar with now. That's the PM 2.5 microns. Okay, so you get an idea. One PM10 particle would have about 4 or 5 2.5. Now they're much smaller. Okay, they're much smaller, and these are the kinds of particles that could, upon being breathed into your system, embed themselves in your mucosal lining of your lungs and your alveoli, for example. It's a problem, and these can be the causes of health effects. And I'm gonna let the doctor talk about those. That's far from my area of expertise, but I know you're going to get some information on that soon too. But these are the smaller ones. These are the ones that are actually much more readily reported, much more problematic as far as health professionals and environmental scientists are concerned. Okay, so this gives you just an idea of how beach sand would compare in comparison to that too. So that hopefully gives you a better idea on PM 2.5. Now, everyone should be familiar with this scale. I'm not going to read it to you. This is the scale that our school uses and publishes. And it's a scale of basically 1 to 300 or so. And this gives you an idea of what Bangkok Patana will allow on a certain day with respect to the air quality. Okay, and you can see here that on some of the good days, full activity, nobody's restricted whatsoever. But once it gets up into the caution for all category, primary students are limited in their activities. Staying indoors is what they're supposed to do. Secondary students are allowed a little bit more. Developing lungs versus slightly more mature lungs is the rationale behind that, I'm sure. And then you've got unhealthy, which is all students indoors, right? All outdoor activities are prohibited. So this is, I think, a really excellent list. Our school is very state of the art with respect to the kinds of activities we allow and that we curb on certain days. But this is the scale. It's available on our website. I want to say Firefly. It's not Firefly. Is it ISAM? Firefly? It's one of the others. Okay, so what is causing all this mess? And I think that's a really fair question. And there are lots of bits of information out there. I'd like to kind of set the record straight on certain attributes of aspects of what's causing the Bangkok air pollution scenario. Okay, so number one, without a doubt, is automobile exhaust. Okay, and Bangkok, if you looked at Bangkok on a yearly average basis, okay, on a year-end basis, automobile exhaust stands out as the number one contributor to the particulate matter, the VOCs, as well as many of the other aspects of the AQI, such as the nitrogen oxides and sulfur oxides, etc. So automobile exhaust cannot be discounted. Okay, it's the #1 contributor on a year-wide basis. Now people are thinking, but what about the fires? Well, those are coming up. Don't worry about that. I definitely will hit upon that. Now, when you think about Bangkok being a major metropolitan city with probably more cars on the roads than the roads were designed for, I think that's a fair estimate. There's going to be an aspect of air pollution coming from those that is extremely, extremely taxing on the average resident here in Bangkok. Okay. This is an example of a typical day outside of our school. Now, this is not our school, but it looked like it enough to where I just kind of took this picture and went with it. On any given day, on a the drop-off time and pickup time at the end of the school day, there's a lot of cars sitting there, idling vehicles, traffic jams, Tamduan, the tollways that are actually just jam-packed with cars on any given day, probably 3 to 4 times a day. You're going to have idling vehicles. Now, idling vehicles are quite problematic. They're very exhausting on the engines. They are taxing on the machines themselves, and they're actually really, really polluting on a local level. We have so many of the so-called aspects, components of the AQI that are being emitted right outside of our offices, right outside of the areas where we walk and live all day long. And that's a huge problem in Bangkok. It's any city, but Bangkok in particular, that's where we're concerned with. Now, it's really an interesting scenario here. I've had many of my students do serious science on this particulate matter aspect around Bangkok Patana in particular. And you can see this is one of my seniors from a couple of years ago. She did a very simple transect from a few steps to many steps away from Sukhumvit 105. And she did a very serious count, microscopic count of particulate matter. She found that as you left, and this is nothing that is intuitive, I think, but as you gain distance away from the main road where the particulates are actually being emitted, there is quite a bit fewer particulates in the atmosphere. And her data, she did thousands of samples on this, and she actually came up with some pretty conclusive data. I've also had students do a vertical transect from street level all the way up to about the 40th floor in some of the taller high-rise apartments here in town. And there's a similar trend in particulate matter. So the distance you are compared to the road will indicate and be very clearly supporting how many particulates you're going to be breathing in on any given day. So, and this is all automobile. This is all automobile, well, mostly automobile generated. Another major force in polluting our airs is the industrial emissions. Okay, now various regions of Bangkok, Chonburi, for example, or Saraburi in particular, have some pretty heavy industry, and a lot of these smokestacks are unscrubbed. In other words, they're not filtered, and some are, but not all. Not all are. And so consequently, we're getting a pretty heavy dose of industrial emissions as well. And these can be extremely bad on certain days and not so bad on others. Depends on the winds, depends on how, the dominating wind currents are on any particular day. This picture was a concrete factory up in Saraburi, which is an extremely heavily polluting source. Saraburi on any given day will actually have some of the worst air in Thailand. It's kind of a hidden secret that area near Khao Yai is actually really, really bad, mostly due to the concrete factories up there. Coal power, this was taken over in Chonburi, is also a factor. It's not as much of a factor in Thailand as it is in other countries, thankfully, but it does, depending on the winds, produce quite a lot of particulate matter, and also the nitrogen oxides and a lot of the other pollutants and sulfur oxides that are part of the AQI. Construction dust, major source of particulate matter here in Bangkok. It's a building city. I mean, there's just cranes everywhere. There's a lot of activity everywhere. And this dust is a huge factor for so many of us here in town. And I lived next to an apartment that was being built, and that was a huge source of dust. Agricultural burning. Okay, the agricultural burning. Now, this is the heart and soul of the last 3 or 4 months. And it cannot be overstated how much of an issue the agricultural burning is. And it's actually so much so that it's actually causing huge influxes of people into hospitals. I remember a headline a couple of weeks ago about 200,000 people were admitted in a week into hospitals due to this agricultural burning. It is the reason why airports are affected, people are affected. Chiang Mai is heavily hit, so much so due to the agricultural burning. Also, the burning of the wildlands. There is a lot of burning for various reasons of our national parks here in Thailand too, and wildlands to try to, in some cases, people try to poach the land, try to steal the land. Some people are trying to simply increase the amount of harvest for mushrooms on any given year, because many of the mushrooms will actually come back in bigger force and greater numbers and biomass after a burn season. So this is one of the reasons we have such an amazing burn season here in town. Now, one of the myths I would like to dispel is, and I've heard this a number of times, is that the one of the main reasons that we have all this dust and this smoke emissions come in from hit us here in Bangkok and other parts of Thailand is due to the actual other countries, due to Burma, due to Laos, due to Cambodia. And there's no question at all that these burning issues are a transfrontier issue. I mean, transfrontier is an environmentalist way of saying across international boundaries. And there's no doubt about it. The smoke does come in from Burma, Laos, and also Cambodia. But if you look at this map, much of this particular burn here is actually happening within the borders of Thailand too. So you can argue that Burma is burning and we're receiving its air quality. True, but I can say for sure Burma is also receiving Thailand's air quality. And these burns are on any given day just as numerous, and maybe even sometimes more numerous, inside the boundaries of Thailand. And we are all, this being Bangkok down here, a recipient of the poor air quality on those burn days. And the good news is, though, we're nearing the end. The rains were going to come. But one of the confounding issues that we in the Chao Phraya River Valley have are what's known as thermal inversions. Now, I took this picture from Pulawang National Park, Wildlife Sanctuary in Loi Province. Okay, and you can see there's a clear-cut line across here. Below that line, we've got a pretty polluted, pretty smoggy day on the basin of Loi Province, and above that, it's crystal clear. And this demarcation was such a perfect example of a thermal inversion that I actually photographed it. Now, just real general here, thermal inversions. Normal days, we have warm, cooler, cold air. And that's a circulation pattern that allows for air to kind of cleanse itself on any given day. But in a thermal inversion period, oftentimes in the wintertime, you get a warmer inversion layer that kind of acts as a cap. It caps the cooler air. And consequently, anything that's produced within and below that cap stays in that cap. And we have these amazing days like in this slide right here. Now, this picture was taken on day 1 of my trip there. Day 2, we had an amazing windy night. Even a storm came in a little bit. And look at day 2. The smog was dispersed a little bit, but you can see the thermal inversion had been, in fact, disrupted. And I think this is a classic set of images that shows this, the force of such a thing here. Now, if the winds were to continue, this could blow away to that magical place called Away. Now, we are on the edge of the smoggy season here, and it's been a particularly bad one, no question about it. But when the winds and the rains come, we do see a cleansing effect to our atmosphere. But let's not fool ourselves. The major sources of the high AQIs that we have here in Bangkok are still with us. The automobiles, the construction, and so on. We have a 3 to 4 month burn period, but the rest of the year is just the same. So there are many, many things, many issues that Thailand needs to tackle to help better this situation. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pull out. I'm hoping that everyone see this? All right. Okay. Are you with me? Okay. All right. So at this point here, I hope that was seen. I'm kind of on the other side of the screen here. So did that come across okay? Did everyone hear that okay?
Yeah,
okay.
it did Coke.
Okay.
Do you want me to open up for questions?
Sure. If anyone has any questions, now is fine, or we could wait till the end. Either way is fine with me.
All right, perhaps at this moment we'll switch the agenda a little bit because it is 9:25 and I want to give Dr. Fah enough time to make a presentation. So Dr. Fah, just a moment here, and we'll get you up on screen. There we go. I'd like to now introduce Dr. Fah from Bumrungrad International Hospital and Vitalife Scientific Wellness Center. So Dr. Fah is a preventive medicine specialist, and her special clinical interests include longevity medicine and functional and regenerative medicine. She is also a rehab Pilates instructor, so she's really very interested in our whole well-being. Dr. Fah treats young people and patients of all ages, actually. Again, with these specialties, she spends a lot of time considering the environments that affect her patients, and she's here to talk to us about healthy living in Bangkok. By the way, Dr. Fah also proudly told me that her nephews are currently enjoying their education in our primary school. So welcome, Dr. Fah.
สวัสดีค่ะ Good morning, everyone. So I'm gonna share my slides now. Please let me know if you see the slides.
Good.
Okay, good. Okay, so I think thanks to Kun Kok, he covers most of the things that I want to talk about PM 2.5 and the source of the PM 2.5 already. So the topics that I will cover in the next 15 minutes going to be about the recommendation regarding the activities that we can do during the PM 2.5 and the heat stroke prevention, because we realize that nowadays the temperature in Bangkok, and actually not limited to Bangkok, but in Thailand and even around the world, it's gradually rising each year. And however, for the past 1 month, you might have seen the news of the deaths that regarding the heat stroke. So that we're going to talk about that how we can prevent it and what are the signs that we should be aware of. And the last one, I'm going to cover about the lifestyle tips for all of us so we can stay healthy to protect and improve our environment. Okay, so before I'm going to go to the PM 2.5, I would like to thank you, Kun Shirley and Kun Kok, that you have the special teacher that talk about environment, because when we talk about longevity, when you look at the paper or the database, we will find that centenarians people, they tend to live in the area that we call the blue zone area. And one of the factors that have the impact to our health and longevity is the environment. So no matter how good you try to take care of yourself, you eat healthy, you try to exercise, you have a good sleep, you know how to cope with stress, you don't drink alcohol, you don't smoke, even though you do all of that perfectly. But if we still have the bad environment around us, it's also another major factor that impact our health, and we will see later why. So start from the PM 2.5, that is a major concern in Thailand, especially for the past couple of years, apart from the COVID one. And I think you can notice that during the COVID situation, because we have the lockdown, you might notice that actually the degree of the PM 2.5 in Bangkok actually was less than after the lockdown. So definitely the traffic jam contributing like a part of the huge factor to the PM 2.5 problem in Bangkok and in the urban area. And the issues that we want to focus on the PM 2.5, because as you can see, because the particle is very, very tiny. So when you inhale, it's going to pass through your bronchus and trachea to your airway and reach the end that we call the airbag or the tiny alveoli in our lung. And that's why it's triggered the inflammation in the lung. And later, we also find that this PM 2.5 not only cause damage to our lung and the respiratory system, but it also related to the increased risk of stroke and heart disease, which is two of the major cause of death in the people around the world. So what are about the impact for the kids or the children? As you can see, this one is the information from the World Health Organizations. We know that the air pollution is one of the major cause of factor that cause the children's mortalities. And surprisingly, we found that over 500,000 of children under 5 years old, the cause of the death is related with the air pollution. This includes your indoor and outdoor air quality and the secondhand smokers. And the impact from the disinhalation of the air pollution in the kids, one of the major issues is they stunt the children's brain development. So your kids' brain function, they can think slower when they breathe or inhale the poor air quality. Also, it's gonna increase or trigger the asthma incidence. And in the long term, when they're getting older, it's also like increase the risk of cancer, the chronic respiratory illness, cardiovascular disease, and stroke, like I mentioned earlier. And the major cause of the death around the world, like I mentioned earlier, the first two is the cardiovascular disease, which is the ischemic heart disease or like heart attack and the stroke. And also like cancer. And you may have noticed in healthcare industry, we start to notice in the highly polluted area right now, not only Bangkok, but in Chiang Mai up north also have quite a serious issues regarding the air pollution. We notice the rising trend of asthma and lung cancer in that region also. So definitely the air pollution or the level of PM 2.5 cause the deteriorating issues for our health. So how can we protect ourselves from unhealthy air? We're not going to talk about the policy from the government. So we're going to focus on the things that we can do to protect ourselves for now. So this recommendation adapt from the American Lung Association's recommendation. In terms of the air quality index that Kun Kok already explained to already, I think the criteria at Bangkok Patana to protect the children is very, very good and maybe a little bit above the standard already. As you can see, like people who wear like a smartwatch, right, like myself, I'm going to have like the air quality index on my watch. If it's below 100 for the air quality index, below 100 is fine. But once it's above the 100, for the sensitive people, we might limit the timing that we have the activities outdoor. And let's see the other things that we can do apart from check daily air pollution. So we will know how we should like prepare ourselves before we go outdoor. Number two is always avoid exercising or have the outdoor activities. Don't let your child like play in the area or the playgrounds that near the high traffic areas. Like Kun Kok already mentioned earlier, that the high polluted or high traffic area does cause a lot of pollution. And based on many papers, not only to that record that you saw that Kun Kok shared, even in abroad, they have a strong evidence that the highly traffic areas, the pollution can like flow away up to 1/3 of a mile from the spot that we have like those vehicles that idling on the roads. And for ourselves, the things that we can help protect our environment is try to find a way to use less energy in our home. If we're gonna go to something like that very close by, if possible, we might choose to walk, or like Kun Cheryl, that she bike to school every morning. You can do a bike or you can do a carpool. And encourage the school to reduce exposure to school bus emission, which in Bangkok Patana, you do a great job already. And for ourselves, don't burn wood or trash. And for people who are like the Asian family, sometimes we have tradition that when we like pay respect to the God or to the Buddha, we want always burn the incense. So nowadays, we recommend that if possible, no need to burn, and they have like the new technology, like those candle that we use electricity instead. So actually try to reduce the burning activities in our life, and tobacco free. And the last one is try to be environment and have a social responsibility. We can start easy just by the recycle the waste. That's for the example. And then the next one, most of the parents when come to the hospital always ask when it should be okay to let the children play outdoor. So they have the paper that they do the research to answer this, and they find that actually to be engaged in outdoor physical activities under the ambient fire particulate matter pollution risk-benefit analysis. They find that actually the benefit from the outdoor MPA is moderate physical activities outweigh the health risk from PM 2.5 pollution. So when the PM 2.5 under the recommendation criteria, which is like the air quality below 100 or the PM 2.5 less than 50, is totally safe to allow your kids to have the activity outdoors, and they're just going to limit the timing or like the intensity of the activities outdoor to make sure that your kids are safe. So please, when the air quality is in the yellow color, trust the schools. They are under like the proper guideline already, because the outdoor activities to get the kids moving is still very, very important for children's development. The group that we found that are the most sensitive groups for the air pollution, actually not small kids, but actually the elderly. We found that adults aged above 60 years old tend to be more susceptible to the impact of PM 2.5 pollution. So apart from your kids, maybe take a look back to your parents also. Then the next one, people always ask which type of the mask that I should use to make sure that it is safe. So the best one still N95. But when you wear N95, this one is very difficult for you to breathe. If you wear N95 properly, it seals everything. So the air will be closed, cover the nose and cover the mouth under the chin. So everything is going to be like a closed environment. It's going to close everything. So it's you just like filter the air to this tiny filter. So usually even for our doctors, we can stay under the N95 around only 30 minutes. And lately, they also have the people published in Nature. They have the carbon dioxide monitor sensor in the mask also to identify like when you should like get out of the mask. So for the N95, it's the best one. I think not common to use in terms of a daily life, but when you're gonna enter like a very high polluted area, like in those purple color, like 300 AQI, maybe you need this, and you have to really limit time to be outdoor. And for the daily life, you can just use the surgical mask. You can see the benefit of it. The efficacy is around 56% to 83%. Even cotton cloth mask also effective. And in terms of the mask that they provide a filter, carbon filter have the highest efficiency in terms of a filter the pollutions. So in conclusion, N95 mask or surgical mask is okay to use in the polluted area. And the things that we need to focus also, we find that during the pandemic, because we use the mask more, not to protect ourselves from air pollution, but to protect ourselves from the coronavirus. We found that actually by protecting ourselves, we create more pollution from the pandemics. They have all of these masks like staying around, and if you throw the mask in the bin of the waste, like throw away with the food and with the other stuff, it's going to cause more problem also. So I strongly encourage that if possible, you should throw away your mask that you use on a daily basis in a separate trash bin, because then the Bangkok metropolitan, they can manage it properly. The next one is about bipolar ionizer. This is another one that many parents always ask me whether it's good to use for themselves and whether it's good for kids to use it. So the function of the bipolar air ionizer is that they release the ionides that's going to trap or attach to the particle in the air. So it's going to be too heavy to flow into your airway. So some of them going to claim like you wear your own helmet or your own shield around the face. So that's the principle. However, the downside based on some paper, this bipolar air ionizer might produce some amount of the ozone also. So when we look at try to find the research about this, we still find little research to prove the efficacy or the like harm or the safety sides outside the lab condition. So in my opinion, I would not force you like to use it. It's unnecessary to use it, but if you want to use it, it's okay as long as you feel good about that stuff. But it's not going to be the things that I'm going to say that, hey, you should use this and it will help prevent you from the air pollution. Is we don't have that enough data to prove the effectiveness and the safety of this type of device. And another one is about the heat. So the heat is very, very critical, and especially in Bangkok, that where you have a high humidity, that's gonna cause the air to become more oppressive. So you're gonna feel like more uncomfortable. And the people who like are sensitive are children, because sometimes they don't know themselves. And the older adults, the outside workers, and people with disabilities. And the one that I think that you need to focus, not the house with little or no AC, but in the cars. So it's very, very important not to leave your kids in the cars during like the hot weather. And if you choose to leave your kids in the car and then you start the engine, you're going to be the source of the air pollution by yourself. So try to avoid that. And the key to avoid is wear the light clothes, maybe the cotton one that have a very good air ventilation. Try to stay cool in the good ventilated area, and try to stay hydrated with water. So sip water during the day. Some of my patients, they always like cannot sip the water during the day. They have to like just sit down and properly like drink like maybe 1 or 2 bottles of waters. But we find that when you slowly sip the water throughout during the day, it's gonna provide a much more benefit than just drink at a high volume of the water at one time. And symptoms that you should notice or inform your kids is when they're playing outdoor. If they start to feel a little bit dizziness or feel the thirst or like sweating a lot more, that's going to be the time that they should stop and have to move to like under the shade and sip the cool water. Because if we don't notice ourselves during this part, it might turn into the heat stroke that cause the confusion, and for some people just become unconscious. And this one, the most important is just you really need to cool that person with the water or ice. And last one about the tips, how to protect ourselves in general. Like I mentioned earlier, it's not only our lifestyle, but it's about environment also. But the lifestyle that we talk about right now, we separate into 6 pillars of lifestyle. That if you take care of yourself in all of these 6 pillars, it's a guarantee that you will stay healthy and stay away of cancer, of cardiovascular disease, of diabetes, of obesity, of cholesterol. The 6 pillars are physical activities, the stress management, the meaningful relationship, the sleep, the cessations of tobacco, and nutrition. Since we have limited time today, so I'm gonna focus on the 2 major items, which is food and sleep, which I think very, very important, especially we have more incidents or more report about the kids who doesn't have enough sleep lately. So all of these factors, as you can see, the diet, the excess calorie intake, poor nutrition, sedentary lifestyle, sleep deprivation, and mental stress, all of them have their own way in terms of like a trigger or increase the risk of a chronic disease. So if you have questions, I will elaborate a little bit more, but because we have limited time, I'm gonna jump to the recommendations so you can have tips that you can do at home. So in terms of the food or nutrition for the kids, we find that family is the best person to actually make the good habit to the child, not the school, but actually the families. And we found that if you have the habit of like eating out all the time, the group that always eating out tend to have the higher incidence of obesity, hypertension, high cholesterol, and the diabetes. Because when you're eating out, we cannot control the quality of the food. And most of the time, the restaurant, they need to make the food taste good. So they tend to put some additional salt, maybe extra sugar, or maybe extra MSG to make the food taste good. So that's why when you have the habit of eating out all the time, it does increase the risk to have the chronic disease in the future. And also, if you start to put your kids to eat a lot of sweets since they're young, the downside of the sugar is that they're going to trigger the pleasure center in the brain and release the dopamine, so they feel happy, like they use the nicotine or like some of the substance. So they have the addiction to the sugar, and the more they eat sweet stuff, they're going to craving for more sugar. So the best way to protect your child from these bad habits is actually allow them to taste the whole food, the natural source of sweetness in the nature, without adding extra sugar inside. And that way is gonna help them not have the forming the habit of like a sugar addiction, which is quite difficult to break when you're getting older. And another issue that we find is they have the rising trend of the children obesities. And sometimes the parents tend to like try to control the calories or reduce the portion of the food for their kids, which as a doctors, we don't want you to make your child focus on the scale, on the weight, and also the calorie counting. They're gonna form the habit that they have like a negative relationship with the food or eating habits, and it's going to increase the risk of mental health like a depression disorder and the eating disorder in the future. So all of you, if you always eating out, I might encourage you that maybe find out once a week, Friday, that you can do like home cooked meal together, and then you can like learn together with your child that, okay, this one, this strawberry, this vegetable from this farm tastes good when we cook like this. So it's a good starting point to form healthy eating habits. And another one is about the sleep. This is the recommended hour of sleep for the kids in the 6 to 12 years old to 13 to 18 years old. You can say around 9 to 10 hours per night is the recommendation. And for adults like all of us, we recommend that should be 7 hours or more. So if the sleeping hour is below this, it's definitely related with the risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, and obesity. So we find that in the middle schoolers, 6 out of 10, more than half, 60% don't get enough sleep. And for teenagers, even worse, 70% of them, we find that they don't get enough sleep. And what are the causes of that? Number one, I think all of us aware, because all of us in the adult also same problem. Want to get off electronics and social media at night. This contributing to the cause around 56%. And also might be the irregular sleep schedule. Maybe they have some project that they need to stay late at night. That is this contributing to 43%. Might have some worry about school, worry about social life. And for the health problem or medication, they're gonna contributing as a cause only 10%. So the way that we really need to focus on the sleep quality, because in the short term, your kids or even yourself going to have difficulty in concentrating or focus in the classroom. Also, they might have mood swing. The ability to control the mood going to be much difficult. For teenagers, it's difficult by their own hormones already. And if they don't have enough sleep, it's going to be much worse. The other one is impaired memory and also look fatigue. In the long term, it's going to cause a poor work performance, cognitive decline, and heighten the risk of dementia. So the sleep hygiene for teens, I think that every house should have a rule, like when you come to school, limit time of phone use or electronic use, should not touch any phone or electronic device at least half an hour before bedtime. And also exercise or active physical activity is also important in terms of improve the quality of sleep. And also encourage to have a routine of the bedtime and the wake up time without using the alarm. Some of us might snooze all the time. Some of my friends have like a 20 snoozing. That doesn't work, because when you go back to sleep, your brain wave not going to be in the stage that contribute to any health benefit during that time anyway. And another issue is it's very difficult to sleep. You might try to look at the environment in the bedroom, whether like no light exposure in the room, the bed is the mattress is clean and warm and cool enough. And the most important, ensure that the bed is only for sleeping. Don't play the laptop, don't play the phone while you like lie down on the bed. That's one of the issues that we find cause the problem with the sleep. So the last one about nutrition that I want to add is actually certain food might help protect ourselves from the risk from the PM 2.5. We found that carotenes rich food, which is found in the orange color, yellow colors, like pumpkins, carrots, papaya, or even bell pepper, very good in protecting our lung from the damage risk from the PM 2.5. So on the day that very like heavy pollution, you might consider eating like a pumpkin soups. That's for example. Okay. And that's all of my slides. So I might go through very fast. Any question is welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Fah. Let me see if we have any questions. One question is about obesity in Thailand. So recently, over the past few years, we've seen increasing obesity amongst adults. Do you see the same thing in teenagers? I mean, in children as well?
Yes, the incidence of obesity, I think, is keep rising. It might be two issues, like people aware of that more. We have a better screening methods in terms of detecting like who have like the obesity or the risk of obesity. That might be one of the issues, but definitely the poor nutrition and the limitation of physical activity that's contributing to the obesity problem, and not limited to only adults, but to kids also. As you can see, especially not in Bangkok Patana, I talk about like general population in Thailand. The food, when, for example, when you go into the convenience store, the food that you find on the shelves, you can just like hand pick that which one of them is the nutritious and the good one. Usually it's going to be high calorie food with
Right.
poor nutrition in the convenience store. So that actually, I think Thailand still have a challenging issues in terms of create the environment that is encourage the healthy lifestyle. Is like for me, I am a vegan. As you all know, if we don't cook by ourselves, it's very difficult to find a restaurant that provide the vegan meals. And when you find the price when compared to khao grapao or like a mupping and sticky rice, the price is much, much higher. So that's why I think it's very difficult for people to have access to the healthy and nutritious food.
Thank you. I have a question. Actually, Coke, this might be one that you might drop into, but also interesting for you, Dr. Fah, is Penny has a comment. She said, it's difficult to walk bike to school when the air is bad, but I understand why we should. And actually, it's not necessarily a question just for Coke or Dr. Fah, but interesting. She says, is there some initiative we can try where we have one day where we promote walking to school? I think that we've got the PTG on the call, so certainly the PTG members, if you could take this into consideration and see it's something that you do. Dr. Fah, do you have any comment about that, walking to school?
I think very difficult for people in Bangkok. As you can see, our traffic policy and the discipline of people is one of the issues, especially like those delivery messengers. I believe every parent notice. When you drive, it's very scary. Even like when you're driving in a car, you don't know when they're gonna show up, not to mention walking. And even for you to bike, I really, really like admire you that you can do that, because we don't have the proper bike lane for you. The walking, it's not for the walk. And sometimes, I think to try to do that outside of the school is going to be too difficult. So I'm going to encourage that you try to be active in the environment that you can control or protect your child. So outside of the school or outside of the house, still the challenging issues that we still need to work on that because it's out of our control. So I'm going to say that I'm not going to ask everyone to walk to school. It's too difficult for them. It's too dangerous for your kids and even for yourself. I'm going to encourage that try to get like more activities in the school, like to walk around school or even in the house. You can do other initiatives like to protect yourself, like in terms of the environment related. Kun Ko can elaborate more, I believe, that I think just but to look at the energy using in your home, it does help. I have some example to show you, and even for myself, we consider to use the solar cells power. Even for many of my friends that I have known, it's going to give you two benefits. One is reduce your electricity cost, and number two, it does reduce the use of those source of energy that we know that we use natural gas and those like coal power. So in a way, it does help. And in terms of the lifestyle, more and more we talk about eat more of the whole food plant-based diet, because we saw some papers, some data that the whole food plant-based diet might help reduce the greenhouse gas emission. So actually, instead of trying to do something that's very difficult to control by ourselves, I recommend that maybe look at the eating, the power saving, and be more active in the area that you still can control the safety of yourself and your children.
I would agree with that 100%. The dangers of a crosswalk, for example, here in Bangkok, it just makes walking and general biking, I think, a real dangerous activity to do. I think I agree also that these should be family-based initiatives and school-based. We have the Student Environmental Committee here at Bangkok Patana. We try to get these kinds of school-based initiatives too, that we can control safely within the confines of our school or at home, et cetera, like along those lines. Biking to school would be great. Unfortunately, I think it's dangerous. We were talking before the talk today about road accidents, and it's a huge factor here in Bangkok, in Thailand in general.
All right, I've got another question. And it is, what do you recommend so probably this is for you, Dr. Fah, what do you recommend based on your own research and clinical experiences, the best way for families living in Thailand to protect their children against health impact of PM 2.5? I'm thinking mainly about the long-term impacts.
So like I mentioned earlier, so the things that we can do for ourselves and kids, like to maintain the healthy, is those 6 pillars. Is your kids sleep enough, even for yourself, not only to your kids? The bedtime, the sleep quality is important. Nutrition is very, very important. Like I mentioned earlier, on the bad day of like a very, very high polluted day, you can eat carotene-rich food, which is like a pumpkins or carrots, or those papaya is a good source of carotene-rich food. Actually, in mango and durian also have high carotene also, but it's a high sugar. So that's why I don't encourage to eat those fruits that much. That's in terms of the nutrition part. And then on the physical activities, no smoking. I believe none of us smoke. And also like a relationship. So that to have your children engaged in the school communities, in the local community is very important to form the habit of have a strong and meaningful relationship that we found also contributing to a long-term benefit of health. And all of these 6 pillars, if you can do it perfectly, it does cause an impact in terms of reduce the risk of those cancer, cardiovascular disease. Then when we look about at the PM 2.5, so choosing the school that have the proper air filter is a good choice already. Also in your house, in your bed, in your bedroom, also important. I think in Bangkok or even like in Chiang Mai that have this problem, we should have an air purifier at home in the area that we spend most of the times. So at least we can like reduce the amount of the exposure that we have. But for the long term, we need to be engaged more in terms of environment responsibilities. So I think that start from ourselves, that you start in your house and your school, I think tiny small action gonna contributing to the greater impact, because if we all agree that this is important, eventually I think it's gonna put enough impact or pressure to the authority to help do something else for us. Because for the other issues like the traffic jam, we cannot control by ourselves. The burning, we need other regulations authority to help like with these issues also. But on the doctor parts, because I involved with the doctors who work in the like all of this lifestyle and preventive medicine, we do aware, and I believe that at least from the doctor's point, we does give the recommendation and the concern about this to the authority already. But for ourselves, I think start focus on what we can do at our like smallest unit in our family first. So focus on those 6 pillars of lifestyle. It's going to be, I think, the best and effective way to start now. So Kun Kok, do you have any recommendation regarding your experience in China? Do they have any like initiative that might be good for the parents to do?
Well, in China, everybody had and was recommended to have an indoor filter within their house. And it was just a basic filter. I think Thai construction has there's a lot of exchange of gases and heat transfer between the buildings. So you'd have to really fix that part of it first. I think we definitely had a filter when we were living in China, and it worked. We actually had a little AQI meter that we'd use within the house too, and it actually worked quite a bit. But we did have to actually seal some of the windows. Thailand's a little harder because it's such a warm country. China had a full winter, so when we sealed the windows, it wasn't that bad of an issue. Thailand has certain problems with respect to filters. I think filters do work. They tend to be expensive. Do you agree with that, though? Do you agree that filters can be efficacious?
Yes,
yeah.
I agree. And based on many papers, they do recommend to use, like you saw the carbon filter also shows a benefit already. No need to be the HEPA filter like in the hospital. Right. But I think Bangkok Patana do it above standard already.
We do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have a very.
Exactly. And I think that would be one step that people could take. And that is like you were saying, it's within your realm of control. You have the control over your own domain, your home. And that's what I would recommend that as well. And keeping children, especially the young ones, I think, out of high particulate area zones and also high particulate area activities where they'd be doing something very strenuous, where there's a lot of deep breathing inside of high particulate areas or times of day, for example. Yes.
I would like to continue on. Looks like we're just getting into a discussion, but it is just past 10 o'clock, and I know that, for instance, Coke is one of our teachers and does have to get back into the classroom. Thank you very much, Dr. Fah. Thank you very much, Coke. I think between the two of you, we've got a nice balance of environment from the air quality stand and what causes it. And Dr. Fah, it was really very helpful especially when you've given us ways that we can counteract effects of the environment to us and our children. The idea of the 6 pillars is fabulous. This session has been recorded, and we will share the recording in Patna News, so please watch for it, as well as Dr. Fah and Coke Smith will give us their presentations so that we could take a look at them. There was some really nice granular information in both of those presentations that are good for the future. Thank you very much. We've got lots of thanks coming in. And also one request, Coke and Dr. Fah, perhaps next week sometime, if you have time, if you can share any resources that people can go to for further information. That would be wonderful. Again, really wonderful. I know we have a short time, much appreciated. So Coke from Bangkok Patana School and Dr. Fah from Bumrungrad Hospital, thank you very much. And I hope that has given all of you some information. Please do look at this week's edition of Patana News, where we will share the recording and more links. Well, the links probably next week, but also the presentations. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
โอเคค่ะ see you ค่ะ